Hi everyone, so in today's video I'm going to attempt to make some applique cutting files from an applique stitch file that I've purchased off the internet. So I'm going to be using Embrilliance Essentials, which I've got open here. Now I've got a folder on my desk with the folder inside it of my purchased design. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a copy of it and work from the copy so that if I make a mess up, I've got the original file without having to go to the site where I bought it and re-download it, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to double click on the file that's on my desktop, and the file I want to work on is this one here. It's called Gnome Heart Zigzag. So I'm going to right click on that folder and I'm going to say copy, close that folder down, and then I'm just going to right click on my desktop and click paste. And that's going to create me a folder here, which is the folder I'm going to work from. So the first thing I want to do is bring the design in that's within this folder for my machine. Now I work on a Janome, so I want the JEF file, but obviously if you have a brother machine, you have a look at the PES file. So I'm going to go to open at the top of the page here. I'm going to navigate to my desktop. Here's the file I've just made. I'm going to double click on it, and then inside this file there are all different bits of information, and the thing that I'm looking for is the file that ends JEF. Now this file comes in various sizes of stitch file for all different machines, but the smallest design is for a 5x7 hoop. Then there's a 6x10 and an 8x8 and an 8x12. So I'm just going to go for the 5x7 and I'm going to go for the JEF. So that's here. So I'm just going to select that. It's going to show me a picture of it here, and I'm going to say open, and it's just going to drop on my page. Now I've got my 5.5 by 5.5 inch hoop here selected, and you can clearly see that this hoop will be too small for this design. So the first thing I'm going to do, go up to the yellow file at the top, which is my preference window, and under hoops I'm going to choose my bigger hoop, which is my 8x7 or thereabouts, and say OK. And then I'm just going to zoom out a bit so you can see now that this design fits comfortably within this hoop. So over on the right hand side now, you've kind of got your properties panes, and you can stretch these up or down if you want to see more or less information in one half than the other. Now if yours isn't open like this, you might just see this. So there's this little arrow here. I work on a Mac. You might not have an arrow, you might have a plus if it's Windows. I'm not sure if you have the exact same icon, but if you only see the name of the file and the size you've chosen and nothing else, you'll need to click somewhere here to open the rest of the design. So if I just select the first step, that looks like it's the placement line for the shoes, and I'm just going to click each section and see what I get. So that looks like it's the placement stitch. Step 2, we're still on the shoes down here, will probably be the tack down. Then you would normally take this out of your machine and you'd cut round your fabric that you've just put down here, and then you'd put it back in and you'd do this zigzag. Then it's going to go on to the next part by the look of it. So if I click on the next bit, you can see this is like his face and his beard, and again you've got the tack down, which would be where you'd put your fabric, and then you've got your zigzag. So there's kind of like 3 steps in this design. I'm not saying that's the same for every file, but in this particular one, it looks as though there are 3 steps to each of the elements. So this would be the basting stitch that it would put down so you would know where to put your fabric. It would stop, you'd put your piece of fabric over here, then you'd get to the next step, which would be it would stitch over the fabric and it would be directly over that stitching line it's put in previously. And then you would cut this out if you were doing all this manually. So you'd take the hoop off your machine, you don't unhoop your fabric, you just take the hoop off, then you'd get your scissors, you'd cut round this with your scissors, put it back into your machine, and you'd do the next step, which would be the zigzag. I want the ScanNCut to cut the fabric for me. So I'm going to start with step 1, and that's the boots. And then what I want to do, I want to make an FCM cutting file of these 2 boots or feet or whatever you'd like to call them for my ScanNCut, so that once it's sewn the placement line, I will have my applique cut with heat and bond ironed on the back, and I can put these 2 sections in, and then it will move on to the next step and it will tack it down and then it will zigzag it in place. So to make my FCM cutting file, I need the first step of each element of this design. When you select it, it will bring a colour swatch up down here. And if you left click on the colour swatch, it brings up this box. And it says applique. Now if yours says colour, just click on applique. And it says not applique, okay? Basically it's saying it's just a stitch line, but I want to make a cutting file that's going to give me my applique pieces. So I'm going to click the drop down arrow and I'm going to choose applique position. That's going to give me this box down here now that's saying it's going to make me a cutting file that's 1.5 millimeter inflated bigger than this actual basting stitch. So I'm going to say save. And as you can see here, it's called it the same name as it is up here, and it's added FCM on the end. Now I just want to make this a bit easier for me to recognise. So I'm going to just click or insert my mouse cursor just before where the dot is. So where it says dot FCM, I'm going to put my cursor just before the dot. And using the delete key on my keyboard, I'm going to delete everything that's there. So I'm literally just left with dot FCM. And what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to call it 1 dash boots or feet, whatever, doesn't really matter. And then it's dot FCM. I'm going to save it on my desktop and I'm going to click save. Okay, and then I'm just going to close that down for a minute. So this is my FCM file now, it's made me. So I'm just going to leave that on my desktop for a minute. So what I want to do now, I know that step 2 and step 3 all belong to there, so I want to go to the next element. And if you look at the file, all these first basting stitches, if you like, are all coloured black. But there is a black there, which is the zigzag. But we know that that's the basting stitch, we know that's the tack down, and we know that's the zigzag. So it's now going on to the next step, which is the beard. So again, it's given me the colour swatch down here. I'm going to left click, I'm going to click on the downward arrow, I'm going to say applique position, leave it all as it is, and save. And I'm going to do exactly the same. So I'm going to bring my cursor after the number 7, so I'm still leaving the dot FCM, and I'm just going to get rid of everything. And this is step 2, so I'm going to say 2 dash beard or face, whatever you want to call it. I've already got my desktop selected as the save place for now, so I'm going to hit save. So I've now got 2 of the ScanNCut cutting files. So I know that's the beard, I know that's the tack down, I know that's the zigzag. I'm going to go to the next section, which is the hat, and do exactly the same. And I'm just going to work my way through all the elements of this design, doing this and making the Appliqué cutting file for each of these elements. So I think I've gone through and got all my files, and what you can do in Embrilliance, you can actually come up here and watch the designs stitch out, so it will give you an idea of what's going to happen. So if you click this arrow up here, it will start stitching the design out, so you can see it's doing the first foot or boot, then the second, then it's going to go back and do the placement line after you've put your fabric down. And because we're inflating the design by 1.5, it should be caught up within that tack down stitch. Then it's going to work its way around and do the zigzags. It's stopping here, I think, because probably another part of the design is going to overlap it. Looks like it, yeah, the beard. So it's not going to do double the amount of stitches there and make it too bulky. So you can just kind of watch and see what happens with your design, and it'll give you an idea of, you know, how you're going to do the process when you come to actually physically do it on your embroidery machine. So I'm just going to stop that there and then move on to the next part. Okay, so now I've got all the elements I need. I'm going to close Embrilliance down. I'm going to open up the duplicated file I made and saved on my desktop, and I'm going to take everything out of here except these 3 images at the top and the 5x7 JEF file, because I don't need all these other stitch files in the different formats and the different sizes, because I've actually got this folder saved in an embroidery file on my computer already. This was just a duplicate I made to be able to make my cutting files. So I'm just going to select all these and delete them, and I'm just going to keep deleting all the files that I don't want until I'm left with the Janome file and these 3 PNG images here. So now I'm going to drag in all the ScanNCut cutting files that I made that are saved on my desktop. I've also got a screenshot of the image that I took from the website I bought the embroidery file from, so that I can refer to it if I want to at a later date. So I've got everything in here now. I'm just going to organise them by kind. So I've got all my images at the top, I've got all my cutting files, my ScanNCut cutting files, I've got the boots, the beard, the hat, the nose and the big heart, which were all appliques. The hands and the small heart are just stitch files, so I don't need a cutting file for those. And I've got my Janome stitch file, so everything is now in one folder. So I can send each of the cutting files over to my ScanNCut machine, or I can just copy them all onto a USB stick and put them on the machine. So an alternative thing I can do is I can open ScanNCut Canvas. It's easier probably to do it with the online version. I can open a new project and I can come to the SVG icon, select that, and I can go to choose file, and I can choose each one of my ScanNCut cutting files, and if there's enough room, put them all on one mat and send the whole mat over to the machine, and then I can cut all these elements at the same time. So a way to do that would be to choose the first design and say OK, and that's going to bring the boots in. Come back to the SVG icon. Even though these are FCM cutting files that are made in Embrilliance, you choose the icon that says SVG. I know it's a bit confusing. I'm going to come to the beard, say OK, put the beard somewhere else, come back to choose file and just keep choosing all the elements that you need for your design, and if they'll all fit onto one mat, then that's, you know, even better. There you go. So I've got all the elements. So I've got the boots, the beard, the nose, the hat, and the heart. So now I can give this a name. I can save it in Canvas Online so that if I ever lose the file or my computer crashes, at least I've got the ScanNCut cutting file. So I'm going to call it EB-gnome. EB is where I got the file from, and obviously it's a gnome. I'm going to save it into the cloud, and then I can download this and send it over to my machine, and I'll be ready to prepare my fabric with my heat and bond and cut all the elements. So I'm going to click download, I'm going to transfer it via Wi-Fi. It says it's gone over, and I'm just going to click close. So now I've got a copy of the cut file in Canvas Workspace Online. I've got each individual element saved in a file. And I've also got the original file that I downloaded with all the different sizes and stitch types. So I've got it saved multiple times. Okay, so I've sent the pattern from ScanNCut Canvas Workspace over to my machine, and I'm just going to quickly show you the fabrics that I'm going to be cutting. So I'm going to use this fabric for the hat, this one for the beard, I'm going to use this piece of felt for the nose, this piece of felt for the boots, and I'm going to use a piece of heat transfer vinyl for the heart. So what I'm going to do, all these pieces have all got heat and bond ironed onto the back of them, and these are all scraps, so some of them have still got the paper on, some of them the paper's been peeled off, but they've all got heat and bond on the back. So I'm going to put the two pieces of fabric on the mat first because the felt is thicker. So I'm going to cut the two pieces that are going to be in the fabric first, then I'm going to cut the felt, and then I'm going to cut the heat transfer vinyl last. I'm just going to position these two with heat and bond side down onto the mat. And gently burnish them down so that there's no wrinkles. And I'm using just my regular standard mat and my regular blade. So any model ScanNCut machine will be able to do this project. I've got the machine turned on. I'm going to come to retrieve data. I sent it over from Canvas, so I'm going to pull up the file, and here are the elements. So it's only the hat and the beard that I'm cutting in this first stage. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to save the whole design into the machine, and I'm going to say OK. So now I can get rid of all the bits that I'm not going to cut. So I'm going to go to edit, choose the selection boxes, choose this first one. That will let me isolate the area of the mat for the designs I'm not going to cut now. So I'm going to say OK, OK. It's selected them all, and I can just send them to the rubbish for now. So I've just got these two elements that I'm going to cut from the fabric. So I'm going to load the mat into the machine. I'm going to say OK and do a background scan so that I can position the two shapes onto these two pieces of fabric which have got the heat and bond ironed onto the back of them. So I'm just going to wait for them to show up, and then I'm going to go into the wrench and just make the background a little bit darker. So now I'm going to put the beard on there and the hat on here and just position it where I can see it. In actual fact, I might just make it lighter again just to see. Yeah, it was better when it was darker, so I'll make it dark. And I think it looks okay, so I'm just going to say OK, select, cut. Just make sure I've got half cut turned off because I was cutting vinyl the last time I used the machine, so that's all okay. I'm going to say start. Okay, so that's finished, so I'm going to say OK and unload the mat. Peel away the waste. And there are the first two pieces of my applique for my design. I'm just going to put those on one side. So now I'm going to put the next two pieces, which are the felt. So again, I'm going to position this piece of felt onto my mat, peel the back of this heat and bond off here and put, I'm going to put that way actually because the boots are spread out. Just going to go back to the machine. Going to hit the home button, say OK to delete all patterns, and then go to retrieve data, and this time from the machine because that's where I saved the file. Just going to jump to the last design, say OK, and now I want to get rid of the hat, the beard and the heart, and I just want to keep the nose and the shoes. So I'm just going to select on one of these items down here and do the same as I did before. Choose edit, choose the three red boxes, isolate this area, telling the machine it's in this area I want to get rid of, say OK, send to the bin, OK, OK, and now I can do a background scan and position the little nose and the boots on these two pieces of felt. So I'm going to select the nose and put it on here. Now I'm going to rotate it because I'm not so sure how much room I've got on the width. I've probably got enough, but I'm just going to rotate it to make it easier. So I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees and position it up here, and then just bring the boots down and position them. I'm going to say OK, 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 OK again, and select cut, and this is felt. So press start and then let the machine hopefully cut these out for me. Now because it's felt, it obviously feels as though it needs to cut it more than once. I'm going to pause the machine and just say quick cutting for now, because I think it will have cut through already. So I'm going to say OK. And I'm just going to lift and see if it has yet. And it has cut through the red. Just check the nose, and that has as well. So it doesn't need to be cut again. So I'm going to unload the mat, and I'm just going to peel away the felt. And there's my little nose piece. And then I've got the boots here. So the two little boots. So the last piece to cut is my heat transfer vinyl. Now I've already peeled the backing away from the vinyl, but I think I'm just going to try and cut it with the plastic sheet still on it. So I'm going to position it down on the mat, burnish it down, and go back to the machine. I'm going to hit the home button, say yes, it's okay to delete all patterns, and go to retrieved data again. To the machine, jump to the last page, get the design, and all as I want this time is the heart. So I'm going to say okay. Select one of these items and get rid of all of these items up here. Now I probably could have attempted to cut them all at the same time, but they're all different thicknesses, so I just thought this would be the easiest thing to do. I'm going to say okay, do a background scan. And I'm just going to get the heart and position it onto the heat transfer vinyl, and hope that the fact that I've removed the clear protective sheet and now stuck it back on, hope it stays in place. So I'm going to say okay, select cut. I'm not going to do half cut because I actually want this cut all the way through. Normally when you use heat transfer vinyl, you cut in reverse and you only use half cut, but I want the whole design cut out because I'm going to be using it as a piece of appliqué. Okay, so I'm just going to see if it's cut through. And it has, and that's fine. So I can now remove the mat. So I can now remove the protective clear film off the heart, because I'm going to sew through this. And I can get rid of the clear plastic, and this is just going to act as any other piece of fabric applique now for my design. So here now are all the elements, all prepared in readiness to be appliqued onto my project. So that's how you make an appliqué ScanNCut file from a regular embroidery stitched file. So I hope that was helpful. Please give the video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you don't already do so. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.